everyone, how's it going? It's Michael Barletta, coming back at you with another tropical update on the two systems that are supposed to make landfall over the next couple days in the Gulf Coast of the United States. Now, if you guys are new here, if you haven't seen any of my videos, make sure to like and subscribe. I put a whole lot of effort into these to give you guys the best, most accurate, most updated information. Also, be sure to check out in the description below my Twitter and Facebook. That's where I post a lot more constant updates all the time, 24/7 on there with the latest that's going on in weather. So make sure to check that out. But without further ado, let's get right into it. First thing we are going to look at is Hurricane Marco. Now, this storm quickly spun up into a hurricane earlier today. I believe the max sustained winds are still at 75 miles an hour. But this storm is certainly undergoing a period of weakening as of the time of recording this video. The cloud tops have warmed quite a bit over the last several hours, going from where we had some negative 80 degree, a lot of negative 70 degree, to now we're just seeing a little area of negative 70 degree cloud tops and a lot of warming cloud tops to the north and west. So definitely seems to be a weakening, struggling system, maybe some dry air getting in there. Not the best environment. Storm is definitely dealing with some shear, as you could tell, because there's no outflow on the south side, so there's some wind shear pushing this storm northeast. And that's evident by also the whole lot of outflow on the northeastern side. So some wind shear, expecting that to not change very much over the next day. This storm is supposed to continue to move to the northwest before potentially making a landfall somewhere around New Orleans. Some of the models do have this curving a little bit before landfall, but we'll get into my specific forecast in a second for this storm. Now, right here, this is my forecast, not the National Hurricane Center, my forecast specifically. Of course, always pay attention to the National Hurricane Center, what they're saying, their watches and warnings, but this is my forecast specifically. I have this storm still a Category 1 by 7 p.m. tonight, but weakening to back down to tropical storm status by 7 a.m. Monday, before making landfall or getting close to making landfall around 1 p.m., 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Now, the most recent model trends have kept this storm a little further to the south and west. Some of the models really hug this southern line on the cone and do not make landfall with this system and kind of just weaken it and die out as the environment becomes a little less favorable for strengthening. We'll see that in the models in a second, but as of right now, I think this is a pretty good track, but I definitely lean towards the southwest of this cone. Maybe making another little cone in there. I think that's a pretty good idea. But from when I made this forecast, I think pretty good. 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Of course, the National Hurricane Center has this still at hurricane strength by the time it does make landfall. But based on the recent trends, I am not comfortable with making it hurricane strength at landfall. I think it's going to be a little weaker than that. But it's two people seeing two, looking at the same thing, seeing two different potential outcomes. So we'll see what exactly happens there. And this is what I meant by the models kind of dying this out and shifting it a little west. You could see this is the European ensembles from today. Pretty much no members actually make landfall. They just kind of weaken the system and move it out to the west without only one or two members really making landfall, and they're definitely not hurricane strength. So that is basically what is currently happening with Marco. So very interesting to see. Potential, we have a hurricane landfall tomorrow. In my opinion, it'll be a little under hurricane strength, but regardless, the same threats are still there. Strong tropical storm, weak hurricane. It really is all the same. Potential for some life-threatening storm surge out there, as denoted by the National Hurricane Center. But otherwise, I don't think this is going to be a huge deal. The bigger deal is going to be this system behind it, Tropical Storm Laura. But before we do get into that, just taking a look at the core of Marco. This is microwave imagery, basically showing you how strong the core is, and the reason this storm hasn't strengthened much, it never really closed a core off. A core would be a lot of red in a circle, and then you'd have a lot of blue in the middle for a strong core. And we were getting a lot of red, but we just weren't able to really close it off on the southeastern side. A lot on the northwestern side, but we couldn't close that off. So that's why some dry air is probably getting in there, hence why we likely are seeing a little bit of weakening out of this system. Now, time for Tropical Storm Laura. This system is currently tropical storm, winds of 50 miles an hour, no gusts. Current pressure is 1,004 millibars, but we will see why I think that is incorrect right now. The hurricane hunters just recently did a pass of this system, finding a much lower pressure, indicating some strengthening, and moving pretty fast, west-northwest at 21 miles an hour. Now, before we do go forward, if you guys want to make graphics like these are my personal graphics. Like I said, this is my personal forecast. Go check out my website. It'll be in the description below, www.wx-graphics.com. You could find a ton of stuff on there. All the graphics that I use, professional looking graphics that could go on TV. Really, really is awesome. I would love it and appreciate if you guys check that out. And you guys could, of course, email me. Send me a message on Twitter or anything if you guys have any questions about it. Great prices. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But this is currently my forecast for Tropical Storm Laura. Have it treading south of Cuba. Also, with this system, I think we're going to kind of tread on the southerly and westerly edge of this cone for now. By tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., I believe we're going to have about a 55-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Might actually be a little stronger than that based on the recent trends. Then we're going to come off the coast of Cuba by 8 a.m. on Tuesday. I believe at that point we will be witnessing a Category 1 hurricane develop. Right when we get off the coast of Cuba, I think we're going to have a pretty strong case for a hurricane. Developing further into a very strong Category 2. This is actually the maximum Category 2 hurricane strength. Category 3 starts at 111 miles an hour, I believe. So this is currently, I believe, is going to hit maximum Category 2 hurricane strength, potentially make a run at major hurricane strength before making landfall somewhere, there's no exact landfall spot, but somewhere east of Houston, Texas to western Louisiana. I think that's a pretty good spot for where we're going to see some type of hurricane landfall out of Tropical Storm Laura as of right now. Now, taking a look at the recent satellite trends, we could see the center of circulation in and around this region. Not very, very strong circulation, but we're starting to really tighten it up. And you could see not a whole lot of convective activity to the north of the system, but to the south of the system, we're having a lot of convection blowing up, which is really, really tugging this storm further south. Really tugging this storm further south, and we may even miss the southernmost part of Cuba. And if this thing stays over the ocean, that's really not good. The models are having a real struggle with this. Almost all of the models have initialized the lower level center of the storm already over Cuba, which obviously would not be good for any strengthening, as storms can't strengthen over land. But this storm, as indicated by the National Hurricane Center and the hurricane hunters, is located much further south of where most of the models put it. So if this storm does end up staying further south before treading southern Cuba, we may see a potentially stronger, possibly much stronger storm south of Cuba, maybe even making a run at hurricane strength before even getting into the Gulf of Mexico, if that indeed does happen. No real indication 100% yet. Personally, I think it's going to take a track a little more like this, a little further to the north, possibly have some more land interaction, especially with this southern peninsula of Cuba kind of sticking out. But if we do try and avoid that to the south, I'd really watch out. Definitely tonight and tomorrow, big things happening with this storm if we do manage to avoid land. And that's why the models have had a very difficult time with this system. They have constantly progged it too far north and constantly made it too far north. All the runs were all the way up here, and yet this system is all the way down here. None of the models really had that besides the UK Met model. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we have all this convection down here kind of tugging the lower level center further to the southwest. So we'll see if that trend continues the rest of today into tonight. Like I said, all my updates are on Twitter. You'll see this minute by minute as I see it, and I'll give you guys the latest updates over there on my Twitter and Facebook at Mike B. Weather. Now, looking at the recent Hurricane Hunter, they actually just got in the storm not too long ago, and they've found already hurricane force winds at flight level. Those purple wind barbs are 64 to 83 knots, which is indicative of Category 1 hurricane. However, this is at flight level, a couple thousand feet in the air, but that just goes to show you that this system has real potential to really blow up, especially if we stay over water. I cannot stress that enough. If this system stays over water, there's a real potential that this might blow up a little faster than we believed. As of right now, it looks like the center drifted a little to the northwest. This isn't really enough of a move to indicate that the storm's going to go this way. Possibly just a little bit of a wobble. And you could see the pressure of the system, 1,002, 1,000 millibars. However, they did find lower pressure, and we're going to look at that real quick right here. They did find a pressure of 1,000 millibars at the surface. However, that's with a 32 knot wind from the southwest. So they didn't get the center exactly. They missed the center by a little bit, which happens. It's a very, very difficult job. You know, you got to really appreciate these people for flying into the storm. So they missed the center exactly with a drop sonde. It's basically a little weather station. They drop it from where the plane is at 700 millibars. It drops, it falls, and it gives you all the data from all the way up and down the atmosphere. But the fact this 32 knot is important is because they missed the center exactly. So the general rule of thumb is drop it by about 1 millibar per 10 knots. So while this says 1,000 millibars at the surface, 32 knots, what it really means, if they were to hit the center exactly, this would be a 997 millibar storm, which is strengthened a lot from just the last update at 2 p.m. The storm was at 1,004 millibars, and we're just about to get another update. It's 5 p.m. So I could have waited a little bit to make this video, but 997 millibars is what I expect the new update to be. Maybe a little tick higher, 998. But that's much lower than last pass, which was 1,004 millibars. So that's a 7 millibar difference in the matter of a couple hours when the storm isn't even in a very conductive environment for development. So that's why I said this has the potential to really be a much bigger system, especially, I can't stress enough, especially if we avoid Cuba to the south, which is looking more and more of a possibility. So this is the same microwave imagery that we looked at for Hurricane Marco. And you could see this system going to the south of Hispaniola. The mountains of Hispaniola actually helped a little bit this storm get its act together. Now, we do not have a perfect core by any means. However, we are seeing one start to develop right over here, and we have some more core down here. So if that could close off, we may see some more explosive development, and that'll be helped by not going into Cuba and going to the south, you know. So we're hoping this does kind of go into Cuba so that the development may be hindered a little bit. And if it does go into Cuba, it's going to take longer once it reaches the Gulf of Mexico to strengthen, because the core may be disrupted. This thing's starting to get a core together. If that core does get together and doesn't get disrupted by Cuba, the second we hit the Gulf of Mexico, this thing has real potential to take off even further than what my forecast showed. But I don't like to be a fearmongerer or anything like that, so I kept it at a little bit lower of an intensity than what I think is possible. And that's because if this does track over Cuba, it's going to take longer for this to really get its act together, which is what we're hoping. Right now the trends aren't really there, but that's what we're hoping. So taking a look, this is the European Ensemble members from yesterday. Last night you could see a lot of members very strong into southern Mexico to western Louisiana, and that's kind of significant because when you look at today's run, a much weaker system, not as many members, very strong. These oranges and yellows indicate a very strong system. You could see the difference between yesterday's run and today's run. Today's run. So much more strong members in yesterday's run, all these pinks, purples, oranges, yellows, as compared to today's run. Not many members, and a shift much further east. You have some members taking this into Mississippi and Alabama. As compared to yesterday, there was no members that did that whatsoever. The furthest east member was going right into Louisiana. So a good trend. That's one of the saving graces. Maybe a good trend there. We'll have to see if that was just a fluke run or a legitimate model run. We're hoping that it was a legitimate run and not just some type of fluke. But regardless, if you look at where these members initialized, they still initialized a little too far north. The center's around down here. and moving in this direction. So it looks like most of these members are a little too far north still, which may mean the run wasn't that great. We're going to have to see exactly what happens. The forecast is going to be much, much better once this gets to at least southern Cuba, if not right by the Gulf of Mexico, because there's a pretty big spread in members even by the time we just get off Cuba, which is only in, what, a day and a half? That's a very big spread, about 200 miles, it looks like to me, over, or maybe 150 miles spread in these members. So, not a great sign for forecast certainty, but hopefully a good sign for some of these members to be right and weaker. And you could see that most of the members that are stronger are in the southwesterly portion of the whole group. The weakest members are in the easterly portion of the group. And then you got some in the middle there. So if this storm does start to trek a little further north, that's a good sign because most of the weakest members are further north. If this storm, as I stated before with the satellite trends, begins to drift a little further south, that's when we're really going to have a lookout for a really strong storm because a lot of these members that are further south, almost all the further south members, are very strong. So before we wrap it up, let's take a look at the dynamical model runs. Almost every single model gets this to a hurricane, with the exception of maybe 3 models that I've never heard of. They all get this to a hurricane. Now, a good portion of those, maybe about a third to half of the models, get this to a Category 2 up to Category 4. Right now, my forecast specifically, treads this line between Category 2 and 3. I think we're going to end up right about there. You could see I don't have a whole lot of model support on my side, but the environment in the Gulf of Mexico is very conducive for development. I didn't have enough time to post a model here of why it's so good, but I could explain it really quick. I didn't want to bore you guys because I know you just want the facts. Not a whole lot of wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico, especially after Hurricane Marco passes. There's going to be a big anticyclone in the upper atmosphere that will likely help intensify Tropical Storm Laura to a hurricane and potentially a very strong hurricane. So I won't get too into technicals, but that's really the reason why. The Gulf of Mexico, a couple reasons. Gulf of Mexico is very, very warm. That water's 88 degrees. 2, not a whole lot of wind shear. Those are really the big 2. Not a whole lot of wind shear out there. So if you guys did enjoy this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. I put a lot of effort into making these guys for you. It takes out a good portion of my day preparing and making these. Like I said, check in the description down below for my website that sells weather graphics. If you want to become an amateur meteorologist, making weather graphics, making your own weather predictions, make sure to check out that website. It's in the description down below, wx-graphics.com. You guys have an awesome day. Stay safe. Make sure to go follow my Twitter and Facebook. And you guys have a good one. I'll be back soon with some more content.